Thank you, Sam. I've got some breaking news story, top of the hour here, and it's this. Nigel Farage says that a man has been arrested for threatening to kill him. The suspect, who has described himself as a terrorist on social media, allegedly said, "I am going to shoot you in the head if you win," on social media. Now, this comes as yesterday we learned that Mr. Farage says he receives 300 threats a month, and that included 600 death threats since February. As Reform UK today proposed a new round-the-clock security plan for MPs and former MPs. A sobering news story to start today's show, and I'm joined in the studio in Westminster by GB News' chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, a deeply alarming story, and it seems to be now coming as something of a catalogue as the security threats against Reform UK seem to be really on the up.
Yes, and we've had Prime Minister's questions with the House united in horror at the death of Anne Widdecombe. 3 MPs or former MPs murdered now in a decade. And now the news that a man has been arrested for threatening to kill Nigel Farage. The threat was made on X on May the 8th. That was the day after the local elections, where he said, "I am going to shoot you in the head if you win." His Twitter picture is of a British Asian man, but he was only arrested in London yesterday.
The Westminster threat matrix is shifting, and British democracy is facing its most unsettling security crisis in decades. Welcome back to Britain Underneath, where we peel away the polite veneer of Westminster to expose the hard truths driving our nation. Before we dive into the chilling shift occurring inside the corridors of power, I need to ask for your support. Creating this kind of independent analysis takes immense effort, so please take a brief breath, look below, and hit that subscribe button right now. Your subscription ensures this channel keeps bringing you the unfiltered reality of British politics. Now, let us dive straight into the unfolding drama.
So weeks and weeks later, it's the first time that an instruction to the police by parliamentary authorities to investigate a threat to kill Nigel Farage has actually led to an arrest. He is currently out on bail. That they're looking at his laptops and his phone. But Nigel Farage has said that he has had 300 or 400 of this sort of threat since the beginning of the year, and that he's always been told that these sort of social media threats do not meet the threshold, which I think people will think is quite incredible. Now, Zia Youssef, the Reform Home Affairs spokesman, was speaking about MP security earlier. Let's have a look at what he said.
If Reform win the next general election, as Home Secretary, I will ensure that all members of Parliament, of all parties, are provided with round-the-clock protection. We will also allocate significant new resources to protect former politicians still active in public life. No matter how much I, Nigel, Richard, or anyone else may disagree with your views, if you are an MP, you must be able to air them without fear. An attack on one politician is an assault on our democracy itself. Knowing Anne as I did, I know she would agree.
So Zia Youssef has also said there's an overwhelming sense of fear among Reform MPs. Quite a horrendous position to be in. So he's promising that round-the-clock security, presumably not just to sitting MPs, but also to former MPs. Anne Widdecombe hadn't been an MP for years, though she was a Reform spokesperson. But first of all, what is that going to cost? Where does it end? You're talking about colossal sums of money, potentially, at a time where we don't have much money. But clearly, there was a statistic the other day, I think it was Bernard Jenkins, that said you're statistically more likely to meet a violent end as an MP than if you're serving in the British Armed Forces or the police, which I think people will find very shocking.
Very, very sobering news to start.
Amid this heightened tension, the Metropolitan Police recently arrested a young man in London following an explicit social media threat directed at Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. The digital post, made during the high-stakes campaign trail, warned of extreme violence if he secured victory. While the suspect has been released on bail pending further investigation, the case highlights a massive spike in targeted hostility. Reports show that Farage faces hundreds of intense threats monthly. For a long time, standard parliamentary guidance suggested these online outbursts failed to meet the threshold for police intervention, but the current climate has forced authorities to draw a firm line. If you want to stay genuinely informed about how these security shifts will reshape our laws, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing today.
A man in his 20s has now been arrested. Brings up to speed.
Yes, very, very concerning story. To give some context, this isn't a new offence. These were posts that were made on social media at the beginning of May, the 8th of May. Detectives were alerted to these social media posts and started an investigation. As a result of that investigation, this man was now arrested and brought into custody, but has now been released on bail pending further investigations. Last week, we saw a press conference from Nigel Farage in which he talked about the over 300 serious death threats that he has received in the last year alone. And obviously, that press conference, far more poignancy was added to it earlier this week, last week, with the murder of Anne Widdecombe. Zia Youssef today did a press conference about MP security and specifically the security of Reform MPs. I was there at that press conference this morning. Let's just have a listen at what he had to say.
If Reform win the next general election, as Home Secretary, I will ensure that all members of Parliament, of all parties, are provided with round-the-clock protection. We will also allocate significant new resources to protect former politicians still active in public life. No matter how much I, Nigel, Richard, or anyone else may disagree with your views, if you are an MP, you must be able to air them without fear. An attack on one politician is an assault on our democracy itself. Knowing Anne as I did, I know she would agree.
So this is actually an incredibly bold, new, radical policy from Reform, promising round-the-clock protection for all members of Parliament and all former MPs still active in public life. Now, Reform said in the press conference this morning, Zia Youssef said that they estimate it would cost about £100 million. One journalist picked up on that and said, well, Nigel Farage was given £5 million, which you say will cover the security for the rest of his life. If that is the cost of security for MPs, then you're looking at a cost of more like £3 billion if you're going to give it to all 650 MPs and former members of Parliament still active in public life. Zia Youssef acknowledged that it could be true that the cost would reach more than £100 million. In fact, he implied that, yes, it is possible that it could be far, far more than that. But he said even if that were the case, Reform, if they were in government, would cover the cost. He said there's no point refurbishing the House of Commons if the MPs in it are either dead or scared for their lives. So this is obviously an issue which Reform is going to take very, very seriously indeed.
This atmosphere of apprehension has sparked an incredibly intense debate over the financial and logistical costs of keeping democracy safe. Reform UK has put forward a sweeping proposal to guarantee round-the-clock, taxpayer-funded security for all 650 members of Parliament, alongside prominent former politicians who remain active in public life. While initial party estimates placed the price tag around £100 million, independent analysts and journalists quickly pointed out the reality. To provide that level of continuous, highly trained protection across the board, the actual cost could easily spiral toward £3 billion. It raises a difficult question for the British public. How much are we truly willing to spend to safeguard the people who represent us?
Interestingly, the Conservatives have come back very hard on this, and in opposition lobby today, Kemi Badenoch's spokesperson said Reform can dish it out but they can't take it. Reform is happy to hold themselves to different standards to everyone else. Kemi faces threats and intimidation but doesn't go around making a song and dance about it. Went on to say Farage was offered the same security as Badenoch but refused it because he said it implied it wasn't good enough for him. So this is clearly going to be a bit of a sticking point between parties going into the next election. MP security. Kemi Badenoch's party also suggested that the MPs should be talking about security for the public rather than the public talking about security for MPs. Obviously, though, we are living in a very, very unusual world. We have had 3 members of Parliament, former members of Parliament, murdered in the last 10 years. Keir Starmer said in his final Prime Minister's questions today that he would like to see a shield put up for Anne Widdecombe, similar to those of David Amess and Joe Cox in the House of Commons. And Ed Davies said that this would be a fitting tribute. It is an extraordinary set of circumstances. Zia Yusuf says that democracy is under threat if MPs don't feel safe. So he is taking this very, very seriously. But of course, it would be incredibly expensive. Reform are going to put out more details about how much this policy of round-the-clock protection would cost. £100 million on the face of it looks like a gross underestimation, but we will see more about the figures in the coming weeks. He said that that money wouldn't be diverted away from policing on the streets, policing the public. He just wants to expand the police force in general.
Predictably, the political establishment has reacted with sharp scepticism. Opposing frontbenchers have dismissed the proposal as an expensive distraction, arguing that public funds should prioritise keeping local streets safe rather than creating an isolated elite class of protected politicians. There are also ongoing disputes regarding the private security arrangements Farage utilised previously, with critics questioning the transparency of his independent funding. Yet the underlying anxiety remains entirely valid. With multiple major political figures losing their lives in just one decade, parliamentarians from every single party are quietly expressing deep concern for their safety. We are watching the fundamental nature of British public life alter before our eyes, shifting from open debate to guarded caution. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this analysis. Take a moment to process these developments, stay informed, and make sure you are subscribed to Britain Underneath so you never miss our deep dives into the forces shaping our country. See you in the next video.